Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 6. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Okay, so the opening takes us even further in the past. Now, I'm assuming this scene in particular is not in the game at all, because not unless there's little things and maybe there's some conversations where Joel talked about his family once again. I feel like I would have remembered that from the first game, so I don't think that happened the first game. And once again, I don't know all the story of the second game, so that could have been something that came up and I'm just not aware. But we flash back to basically Tommy's in trouble, and then Joel is like, don't worry. Because Tommy's like, oh my God, Dad's going to hit me with the belt. And he's like, don't worry, I'll take it. He's like, I got you. It's like, being a big brother. And that is something, Joel talked about last season, that Tommy was to screw up, that he was always, as the big brother, he always bailed his brother out and would always try to help him out. I mean, we saw that at the beginning of the series when he went to literally bail him out of jail. So Joel always held that responsibility. He always took care of, so it kind of makes so much sense that, him having the dynamic that he is, that taking care of his brother, obviously eventually becoming a father, taking care of his daughter, and then all that culminating in him taking care of Ellie too. So, but yeah, we see his dad show up, played by Timothy Dalton, and he's a cop. Wouldn't have seen that coming. And so he's like, oh, it was Joel's like, right, I tried to buy some drugs from some kids and we ended up fighting. And then he's like, no, Tommy was buying weed or whatever, and then you beat up the kids. He's like, yo, I went to the kids, they told me what happened, Joel, like, here you are lying. And it's like, oh, that, so much of that thematically permeates throughout the episode, but we'll kind of talk about it as we progress. But it's like, it is that thing of, he's like, you're not going to lay a hand on Tommy. And it's such a complicated thing, because you're like, you shouldn't lay your hands on your kids. You should discipline them, but that level of discipline, it's an old school mentality versus this is in the 80s. I'm not saying that's okay, but it's like there are different parenting styles, and as long as you don't go too far, that barometer moves from person to person. That comes down to because some people are like, no, laying your hands on your child at all is kind of a no. Like I said, it's an era thing, and this is the 80s, and the way Joel kind of talks about it is like, yo, you do kind of go far, and even he's like, did I ever tell you about the time I stole a candy bar? Because he pops open a beer with Joel, because it's like, all right, we're going to have a man-to-man conversation. And he's like, when I stole this candy bar, my dad punched me in the jaw. He's like, my jaw literally broke. And your grandmother thought, my grandmother thought I would, or no, he might have been Joel's grandmother, as in his mom. But it's like, yeah, she thought I was dead. And he's like, for me, because he's like, well, you know what that's like, so why would you do that to us? But he's like, I've never hit you that way. He's like, yeah, I might have hit you and your brother. I might have gone too far, but never like that. He's like, maybe one day when you have kids of your own, you'll come to realize, all you can do is hope that when the time comes that you do a little bit better. Because he's like, I like to believe I did a little bit better than my dad, and when the time comes, hopefully you do a little bit better than me. And his dad pats him on the shoulder and I guess goes back to work. So we pick up 5 years ago. It's basically been 2 months after Joel and Ellie have kind of come to Jackson, and he's talking to Seth and got some looks like maybe Legos or something like that for kids. He's like, oh, this is for my grandkids. And the moment he's like, oh, I need you to make me something, and the guy was like, I'll have it ready by Friday. He's like, I need it by tomorrow. And he's like, all right, vanilla or chocolate? He's like, say vanilla because it's easier. The moment that I got introduced, I was like, okay, it's a birthday cake. It's Ellie's birthday. And so he also, I believe it was at that same point, he came back and he was working on her guitar. I was wondering if he made it from scratch, but it's like, no, but he put in a lot of time and effort to restore the guitar, even put her moth symbols that she was kind of really into. He put it on the guitar and just did a lot of work. And I was like, oh, that's beautiful. And this is around the time Ellie burns her arm because Tommy brings her there. And she says that thing. And I think it's interesting because what she told Dina in episode 4, it's like, oh, I want to wear short sleeves again. You know, and she says it jokingly. And she's kind of high on painkillers and she's saying it now. Obviously, like, it's meant to be a joke, but it's like, it's much deeper than that because it's like, it's a larger thing of, I don't want to have that question about, like, why does this look like bite marks? Like, I can walk around and never feel like I have that. I don't. It's a physical representation of her not always having to carry that secret. Where it's like, as long as it's a burn mark there, or like no one's going to ever question it, and like it's a little bit of a freedom of like this massive secret of I'm immune. But there's kind of nothing that can be done about it because there's other kids, so we don't have to worry about it, which we'll get into those lengthier conversations a bit later. So, but you know, Joel kind of, and she's like, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. And just like, he's like, it's okay, baby girl. Like holding on to her. It's just like, once again, it's meant to sucker punch you because you're just like, man, like back when things were good between them and him caring so deeply for, because like, yo, that's his daughter, you know? That's the interesting irony behind it because it's like, he technically had 2 daughters, technically 3 because Dina is kind of honorary daughter, but it's just like, it's funny enough that his dad had 2 sons and he ends up with like 2 daughters. You can make the argument like he technically ended up with 2, like at the time of Ellie and Dina, one who liked him and one who didn't. So, but either way, him showing off the guitar to her and showing off the cake too. Happy birthday, Eli. Which is funny because it plays into also like Dina being like, oh, like Ellie if it's a girl, Elijah if it's a boy. So it feels kind of funny in that regard. I don't think you're really drawing a parallel there, but I just think that's kind of interesting. Um, but yeah, Joel shows off the guitar to her, and he wants to teach her and stuff, and that was a whole conversation last season as well about her like him wanting to like teach her how to play guitar. So, because it's been so in the grand scheme of things, it's been a little over 2 months since they had that conversation. But yeah, he plays the guitar, and it ends up being the song that she started at the beginning of episode 5 but stopped herself because you're thinking like, oh, like it's just the lyrics of if I were to ever lose you, and that's enough to make her stop. But knowing like the gift that he gave her was this guitar, and the first time she heard him play and sing, it was that song. So there's even more emotional ties, because I didn't even realize this until someone else pointed it out. When she's in the music store in episode 4, that's also the song she was about to play before she played Take On Me. So she was already about to do it before, but this time she's about to do it again. But this time she says the words, and it's just kind of like in her mind, all she can hear is Joel singing and playing, and there's a deep emotional tie to that song for her in that regard, especially with the guitar. And because her and Joel had that conversation in episode 6 of last season, if I remember correctly, when they were at the university, like what was he going to do if he didn't end up in a career he did as like I think he's like a carpenter, right? No, he wasn't a carpenter. He was in construction, I believe. Um, but I believe he said he wanted to be a singer, so I think that all kind of ties it together. So, and then 8th section, we're skipping ahead a year. Now, this is where we kind of get into, like I said, I don't know all of The Last of Us Part 2 story, but the museum situation, I do remember that. Because the moment, like, like in episode 4 where she's talking to Dina about the Apollo situation, I don't remember, was it Apollo 1, that particular situation where, like, it went up, sadly exploded. That's what, the moment she brought that up, I was like, okay, I knew it was tied to this storyline, like the past. So I was like, okay, that probably ties into the flashbacks, because I knew like that. And the fact doesn't come out of nowhere. It's not just like, oh, a random fun fact. She knows as a fact because, once again, it's still her at that time keeping Joel alive, because like the things he taught me, you had that scene, you eventually had the guitar scene, and it's like, oh, he taught you well, didn't he? He's like, yeah, he did, So it plays into that. But Joel, taking her out, she wants to go on patrol, and even him asking like, oh, so going between you and Jesse? She's like, what? He's like, yeah, you and Jesse spend a lot of time together. I see the way you kind of look at it. She's like, nah, you're barking up the road tree. So like Joel was completely blindsided by her being gay, and he's like, oh, Because I mean, in retrospect, it makes sense because when she brought up Riley in the season one finale, she never actually said like, "Yo," she was like Riley. I think she described Riley as like, "Yo, my friend or my best friend Riley," because they were best friends. She had feelings for Riley, but it didn't come to the surface until right before the end. So you probably don't really want to have that conversation. Really, you really think it was important to have that conversation? Just like, hey, someone I love very importantly and cared about deeply, not knowing like it was like way more love than maybe Joel was aware of, but it's like having that be the first person you ever had to kill. So that's weighty enough on its own, and I guess she just didn't think she needed to express like, well, this is, you already know someone I care about. You don't need to know it's someone that I like legitimately found out I was in love with before the end. But either way, but yeah, like she climbs on a dinosaur. She's losing her mind because I mean, Ellie's had a lot of first experiences, like episode four of season one. First time she was ever in a car, didn't even know what was going on when he was putting the seatbelt on. She's like, "Oh, you're supposed to do this." So it's that, and she's seen the dinosaur. It's like, "Oh, the museum." It's like, "Yeah, as long as you don't fall off the T-Rex, we could go check it out." And it's kind of nice. And the little, it's like, "Oh, you can go to space." And he's like, "Oh, but before you get in there, you have to pick a helmet," and ends up giving her the rock. It's like, oh, take a choice. Make a choice. It kind of, I mean, in the context of it, obviously this episode is very similar to the Left Behind episode with the flashback with Riley. But it also, it's just kind of like, because in that sequence in the game, you could choose what mask you and Riley wear, if I remember correctly, and also like what, maybe not Riley's. I think you could. I can't remember. I know you could like the photo booth thing. You could choose what pictures and faces you make during the pictures, or whether you take the pictures with you once they're taken. But I wonder if that works the same way in part two with the can you choose which helmet you grab type of thing. Maybe it is. I feel like that would be a game choice because I'm sure those sequences are meant to kind of mirror each other in that regard. And obviously in the context of like this season they mirror each other, but even in the context of the game they probably do as well. But yeah, like he takes her in there and he found a cassette that is a recording of that launch. And I thought it was so interesting. He had her close her eyes and envision it, and she loved it. It was like a great birthday present. And that moment where Joel was kind of so happy and proud and feeling so good, that tear kind of rolling down his face. So they end up heading back afterwards. But then partway through, like Ellie stops and she's looking at something, and I'm like, what is she looking at? And it's not. I had to rewind it to be like, what? I don't see what she's looking at, and then I realized fireflies. So I'm like, okay. So Ellie, because the way she's acting, you're like, does she know? Like, when did she figure it out? It's like Ellie knew somewhere in the back of her mind. She wasn't certain, but she kind of knew. But it was just her burying it deep, deep down inside. And now it's a situation of, hey, I just don't want. I don't want that. She just didn't want that to color her relationship with Joel, so she was just kind of like burying that deep because she's like, I don't want to ask those questions. She's scared to ask those questions because she kind of knows, but kind of knowing versus actually hearing someone say it is a little different. Not a little different, quite different. So I think seeing the fireflies kind of sparked that in her. And then we time skip to a year later. Joel's bringing her the cake. I do think it's really interesting that each of these flashbacks, and maybe it works like this in a game too, that each year it's time skipping to is exactly her birthday. So he walks in her room and sees her making out with what's her face, who's her ex. Obviously they were just, I guess, just getting together at this point in time. And Joel was like, whoa, what are you doing? What's going on? It's like, hey, she's 17. And she's like, well, I'm 19. And he just like stares daggers at her. It's like, cool, I'm getting out of here. He sees the tattoo gun and is like, wait, what? You got a tattoo? What's going on here? And at first second, I won't lie to you, I was like, hey, yo, was Joel in his homophobe bag? Which the moment that scene happens, I'm like, is that why he reacted even harsher when it came to the Seth situation, calling them a slur? Like, I was like, oh, because you recognize, like, because he's an older school dude, and sure, there might have been some progressive people at that time in 2003, but it's like that kind of fades away. You don't know how to really deal with that. That's probably a part of his life he never really interacted with, because he's looking at it like, oh, you are experimenting with girls. She's like, I'm not experimenting. And it's just like, he's like, well, I'm going to talk to you when you were in your right state of mind, because it's like, you just got a tattoo, you were just hooking up with a girl, and you're up here smoking weed. So he was just, caught off guard because he's like, oh, you're doing all the stereotypical teenager shit all at once. Because once again, he's going through this for the first time. He sadly never got this opportunity with Sarah, you know? So it's in those moments that he's becoming a lot like his father. Granted, he never laid hands on Elle. I mean, granted, he did. Well, I mean, let's not forget, like, he did chuck her against the wall the first time they met. But, you know, post their relationship being what it is, like, he's never laid hands on her in that regard. And so that is a thing of making him better than his father in that regard. So, and I'm sure he was the same way with Sarah. We saw these, you know, little we saw their interactions. He seemed like a decent and good father with Sarah, and a good father with Ellie. So frustrated, this is when Ellie starts moving out, and you're like, oh, so this is what the catalyst was. But then he stops her in the middle of the night, and it's just kind of like, damn. But you're kind of like, oh, so this is where it happens. But then they stop, and he's just kind of like, she's just like, I think I just need my own space. And he's like, okay, he's because he was like, as long as this is my house, these are my rules. She's like, this isn't your house. This is they gave this to you. I mean, sorry, they gave this to us. And in that moment, she's just kind of like, you know what, I'm sorry. And they're still decently good. I think it's just her coming into herself as a teenager, figuring stuff out for herself. Because once again, this is probably this is the first person she's been with since like the last relationship she was kind of building towards in the way it did with Riley. So there's some pain and trauma associated. So like kind of finding your way back to that in some decent way, like even though there is, like I said, some trauma and pain associated with it. And so Joel's kind of like, don't, just give me a couple days, like you're probably going to need your space. So him being like the one that okayed it, it wasn't like she made that decision unilaterally, but then it's kind of like, hey, let's calm down, it's pouring rain out there, there's nothing in there set up, there's no like heating, there's no running water, like let me fix some things up in a couple of days, give me a couple of days to fix it up, and then you can move in there. You're getting older, you need your own space. I thought that was beautiful. But then he notices like, right, let me look at the tattoo, it's actually pretty dope, better than the thing I put on your guitar. But he's like, what's up with the whole moth? She's like, yeah, I've been kind of dreaming about it lately. And he's immediately like, oh, it's about, you know, change and growth. And she's like, yeah, sure. But like, oh, so like she knows the meaning behind it. But I was like, it's feeling like that'd be more a butterfly thing. And he asks Gail, which they're in a decent enough place because once again, the Eugene thing hadn't happened yet. Because like I said, the Eugene thing was like fairly recent. So we find out like in the grand scheme of things, the Eugene thing was 9 months ago. No, well, actually, it was like a year ago. Present day, relatively speaking, because it was like obviously episode 2 to 3 was the beginning of past the opening of 3 was the 3-month time skip. So, but relatively speaking, it was like a year. Like it was what I thought. Like I said, it was. She was like, "This is my first birthday without Eugene," so like I knew it was like still relatively fresh. And so either way, he went to ask her about it, and she says like, "Oh, it was about death." Now, even in that moment, Joel kind of pauses because he's like, "What does that mean? Does that, you know?" There's a lot of fortuitous to that because of like, well, there's a lot of death associated with her in general, and she kind of says like there's a lot of death because it's like Riley and Tess, and obviously ultimately ends up being Joel. So there's a little fortuitousness there, but it's also like she was supposed to die. At least she believed, and we saw with her drawings that it's like you have a greater purpose or something like that is written amongst. That's what the moths were supposed to in her mind, because she's already thinking like I was supposed to die. That was going to be my greater purpose. Once again, the lengthier conversation we'll have later on, and I thought that was interesting. But it's like on some level, she knows she's not supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be here. So like she's dreaming about it. Plus, Joel killed a shit ton of people to save her. So there's also that layer to the whole death conversation. So it kind of weighs heavy on Joel learning that. So Ellie moves out, and then we time skip 2 years this time. This is her at 19. Even though we're not fully caught up with the timeline, like it's her at 19. So I guess at some point during that 3-month period, she had to, during some point during that 3-month period is when she turned. So she's 20 right now. She's not even 19 anymore. She's 20 right now. I'm sure some game information stuff, like it's probably known when Ellie's birthday actually is, because video game stuff doesn't always, get too nitty gritty about date stuff unless you're, like a Persona or something like that. But you can rough estimate, like, certain things. So obviously her birthday's anywhere between January and March, somewhere in that time frame window. But anyway, and I think this is interesting too that she wrote down the question she had for Joel because she wanted to get it all out. And I think maybe that's also why she had that remark when Jesse was like, yo, write out your thoughts. And she's like, oh, because I'm stupid. Even though she herself had done it before, but she never got to utilize it. So I think that's why she was like, it's stupid. Like, I did it before and it was kind of a waste. So why write down my thoughts? But it's like, yo, I get it. You're angry. And Jesse saying those lines at the time weigh so much now in a greater context of, oh man, like she probably, like that's probably why she decided to handle, like that's why she probably decided to listen to Jesse's argument thing, because she's like, yeah, I wrote down these questions and I wasn't angry, but then she recognizes like, right, one of my last interactions with Joel was because like I let my anger get the best of me because of, like I said, we'll talk about it. So it is fascinating, but she's got questions. She's like, certain things aren't lining up. Because she's like, if there were more immune people, why wouldn't we have heard about that? Like, was it really Raiders that killed everyone, including Marlene? Like, if that was the case, if you had to carry me out of there, how is it that you got through all that carrying me? Like, she's like, a lot of this hadn't been making sense. She's been thinking about it, and it's just like, the more time has passed, the more it's weighing on her mind. So it's between her at 17 and her at 19, that 2-year period, like their relationship was already straining when she was 17, but that 2-year period is when it strained even more, because he was even like later on like, hey, we should hang out more. She was keeping her distance because she was like struggling, like because she knew like the more time she spent with him, she would eventually blurt that out. So she's like, okay, I got to collect my thoughts, I got to ask these questions, I want to write it down. And so for Joel, he's like, right, your first patrol, let's go out there, and she's happy about it because she gets to do it with Joel and find like, oh, I'm growing up, I get to do this, but it's just weighing on her more and more. And he's like, yeah, we should spend more time together. He's like, I know we're both busy, you're busy in particular, and you kind of don't want to hang around me as much, but like, I'd love us to catch up more. She's like, yeah, no. He's like, is anything on your mind? She's like, no, nothing's on my mind. You're like, a lot's on her mind. And because while they were out there, they found out about the Eugene situation. So you're like, all right. So my immediate thought was, okay, so did he have to kill Eugene? Because I thought, okay, so the guy that's with him, Adam. First I was like, okay, so maybe Adam turns and bites Ellie, but she turns out perfectly fine. And Eugene's like, wait, I saw that, and Joel had no choice but to kill him. Because in episode 3, they do showcase that, okay, not in episode 3, in episode 2, kind of hinting like Ellie knows a little bit more about the Eugene situation, we just didn't know what it was. But they came across Eugene and he was already bit. So I was like, okay, so what's the issue here? Because Gail hates you. So I'm like, what happened? Which also, I got to give it up to, oh God, I'm butchering on the actor who plays, obviously you know him from like The Matrix and Sense8. He's just one of those familiar actors. It's Joey. I'm going to butcher his last name. Let's call him Joey P for short, because like I'm going to butcher his last name. But he wants to see Gail. He's like, just let me see my wife. He's like, I got like, I've probably got like an hour. I'll keep my distance from her. It'll be okay. That way she'll be safe. Just let me say goodbye. And you're like, oh boy. And Joel's like, we have these rules. This is it. We have to protect the community. We have to do what's best for the community. And so it ends up being this situation where Ellie's like, no, he's fine. I gave him the test of like, counting to 10, holding his hand out steady. He has time. Do this. And even when she was about to leave, when Joel was like, okay, you go ahead and get the horse. And she's like looking at it. He's like, I promise. And you're like, oh boy. And so I was like, is he going to do it while she's going? And so Joel led him, they start going. And in the moment he's like, go right, you're like, oh God, he's about to do it, isn't he? And he gave him this beautiful view. He's like, right, whatever you need to say to her, I'll pass it along. He's like, I don't have anything to say to her. I want to hear her final words. I want to see her, one last time, I want to look at her before I die. And Joel's like, if you love someone, you'll always be able to see them. And it's so sad because when you think about it, like it's so interesting because there's layers and irony to it. That Joel's last moment with Ellie was he got to see her before he died. So the thing he didn't give Eugene, regardless of it all, Joel still got that, you know? Um, there's more to that later, but also what he, like I said, he robbed did I say Joey? I hope I said I might have said Joey, calling him by his real name, but his maiden name might not even Joe. I don't think it's Joey. I think it is just Joe. But either way, but Eugene is what I meant to be saying. That Eugene closed his eyes and basically it didn't open his eyes. He's like, oh, I can see her. So it did work out in the end, but it was still unfair of Joel to do that, especially because he promised. He promised to both Eugene and specifically Ellie that he would do it. And the moment Ellie came back, I was like, she's going to be pissed with him. Because it's not just this promise. Because for her, it's like, if you broke this promise, that means you broke the other one. I thought it was just a general thing of, I have an inkling that you promised me and that you were lying to me. And now I'm like, okay, I'm going to believe you this time, Joel. But it's like, you breaking this promise was the straw that broke the camel's back in so many ways. And so you could tell like she was upset when she came back. It's like, no. We're supposed to take him to, because Ellie knows how important it is to have that final moment. Like, you know, not everyone gets that opportunity to say goodbye. I mean, even her and Riley were in a like terrible situation. Once again, the whole point was we were supposed to lose our minds together, but that didn't happen. She ended up having to kill Riley. So she knows how important not even having a proper goodbye is. It's like Joel didn't also like Joel did not have a proper goodbye with Sarah. Ironically enough, didn't even have a proper goodbye with Ellie, you know? But at least Sarah was by Joel. Joel was holding her in the end. You know, Eugene didn't even get that with Gail. So you're like, oh. And he's like, I had to do what I had to do. And Ellie's just not saying anything to him. He's like, when we get back, we'll tell Gail what she needs to know. And so he concocts this lie of he had already been bit. There was no time. He was brave. He basically took his own life because he didn't want you to see it. And then Gail leans into him and hugs him and just like, oh, but thank you for bringing him back. But then I was like, oh boy, it's bad. I was like, he's lying. I was like, and Gail's not calling him out, so she doesn't know it's a lie, which is so ironic considering like she called Ellie a liar when actuality Joel's the liar, which I think is interesting. And that's just, it was enough for Ellie. It's just like, you lied. There was time. He killed Eugene and kind of called him out, because for her it's like, I'm tired of your bullshit. You lied to me before, you lied to me again. You're not going to sit here and lie. Your lies stack upon lies, and it was just her taking out her frustrations about his lies, and he's going to continue lying to someone else. And it's like, this person deserves to know the truth, and you're taking the truth away from them. Fuck you, Joe. And so she puts him on blast, and it's just like, you look me in the face and you lie. You broke your promise. You promised. And so Gail slapped him and was like, I'm done with you. Just get away from me. Understandable why Gail hates him. It's not only that you killed him, you robbed her of her last chance to say goodbye to him, those moments they could have had. You even lied like, oh, he said I like you lied. You tried to create this perfect story. You were on some bullshit. You had the best of intentions, but you still shouldn't have taken that from someone else. But that's Joel. Like, he does what he believes is best, and he's just kind of like, in his mind, it's probably Gail won't like it. Like, I don't want to sour Gail's final memory of you like that. Like, you see each other and then like you die. Like, I want that to kind of just, he thought it'd be hard on her, but it's like he's taking that choice away from someone else, and that's what pissed Ellie off in that moment. So time skipped to 9 months later at the Christmas, the New Year's party. And he's seeing Dina and Ellie, and he's kind of figuring it out like, oh, okay. Because at first he sees her and Jesse, and then he's like, then sees her and Dina dancing, and he kind of pieces it together. And so now the context of him pushing Seth, we understand why Ellie was so mad in that moment. Because in the grain, you're like, oh, why? What's up with that? That doesn't make any sense. Like, why is she so extra pissed? It's like, it's been 9 months, but it's just like, once again, it compounded of like her frustrations with him. They haven't talked. They've been distant. It's so interesting considering like Joel kept being like, I don't know why she's pissed at me. When it's like, no, you know exactly why she's pissed at you. Granted, he's like, I did a shitty thing then, but he didn't correlate and connect it to like, she knows at that point. He's like, he doesn't know that she knows about the whole Salt Lake City situation. So we have that. And then, he's talking to like, he also talked to Maria, um, where Maria was like, I'm sorry about the whole refugee thing because like you do matter, not only to me, but a lot of people in this town, because at the end of the day, you are family and there's anything you need, like that's what family's there for, and I think that meant a lot. But also I think on some level it's like it means a lot to him too, because it's like I know you'll be here. Like even if me and Ellie are in a good place, she still has you and Tommy at least. But then we have the porch scene. Now this is where some people are like, once again, I don't know the full context of the scene, but I remember people talking about the scene. This is kind of a spoiler, but this conversation on the porch, I believe, is the final scene of the game. I believe that is kind of a spoiler, but I do believe it's the last scene of the game, if I'm not mistaken. Because I remember people seeing the scene and they were like, whoa, Ellie walked away. Because in the scene in the game, I believe she sees Joel on the porch and then it cuts to black. And then you don't get the greater context until the end of the game. Which I'm sure there's weight and heaviness to, hey, we're like you saving that beat until the end of the series, but we would be getting that until like the end of season 3, so understandable. Versus a game that you can like power and play your way through it, even if it's hours later. This would be years later before we ended up getting this, because it'll probably be another like 2 years before we get season 3. It just depends on like the scale and scope of the production. But I'm sure like a show of this size, and especially with like the sets and stuff, the set design and production of it takes a while because they build a lot of sets and stuff. But either way, I think it's interesting narrative choice to like make a scene like that be the end. Once again, my JRPG point of reference is Final Fantasy 15. Without getting into context, the final scene in that game once you beat it is actually a post credit scene that you never see that scene in the game. It's like when you're playing it, like there's a thing where like all the characters are gathered around a campfire, and then like that scene doesn't happen, but it's taken from that sequence. You just don't get to see it until the post credit scene. So it's just interesting stuff like that. I'm not saying this scene is like a post credit scene. This is probably like legitimately just the last scene of the game and then credits. I don't know. Maybe it is a post credit scene, but I figured as much when people were like, "Whoa, Ellie walked away." Is that them changing it? But it's like I was like, she probably walks away and then she comes back, and we get the context of it. She comes back over and she's like, "I could have handled stuff." He's like, "I know," because she's like, "Oh, the coffee thing," and he's like, "Right." Because I didn't piece that together in episode 3. It was coffee beans she left at Joel's grave because he loved coffee. And that came up in episode 4 of last season. She's like, "Oh, it smells like shit." He's like, "You don't like coffee?" He loved coffee. He's like, "You don't even know what I had to trade for to get this coffee." So it's like one of the last things between them. So that's why she left the coffee beans there. Because like, right, you traded something for it. Who knows what he traded for? Maybe it was something significant. But yeah, that coffee meant a lot to him. It's just kind of a little fun thing, especially when she left the coffee bean, she kind of smiled at his grave. But he even asked about Dina, and she's like, "No, she's just messing around. Like, I don't know why she did that." He was like, "But you do like her, don't you?" And she's just kind of like, I don't know. And he's like, "Well, I don't know what Dina's intentions are with you," which I think is kind of like a neat father thing to be like, "Oh, I don't know what your intentions are with my daughter, but whatever the case may be, Dina would be lucky to have you." And she's just like, "You're an asshole." She's like, "You broke that promise to with the whole Eugene of it all." And for her, it's like, the reason I'm extra pissed, and she lays it all out. She's like, "That face you made the same face when you promised me about the Salt Lake thing. That's why I've known for a while." And so she's like, "I've been thinking about it for a while. So when you made that face again, I wanted to believe you, and you went and broke your promise again." So it's like, if you made that face knowing you were going to do what you did then, I know what you did there, Salt Lake. So she's like, "Tell me the truth of what happened. Because if you lie to me again, we are done." And he tells her, he choked up just like he was during the Gale session of that episode. And he's just like, he tells her the truth. She's like, "Were there other immunes?" "No." "Was there raiders?" "No." what about like the people there? Marlene, was that you? And he was like, yes. And she's just kind of like, you suck for doing that. He breaks it down because she's like, could there have been a cure? And he's like, yes, but it would have involved, you would have died. And she's like, but that would have been my choice. She's like, that was my purpose in this world. Like, you took that away, not only from me, but the entire world. I could have saved the world. I could have ended so much suffering. And he's like, but, he explains his reason for doing it because she's like, you were selfish. He is like, it's because I love you so much more than you can understand or probably ever will. But he's like, if you were ever fortunate enough in that situation, it's like, all I can do is hope, because he's like, right, you're not a parent and you may never be a parent, but if you find yourself in that situation, he's like, hopefully you can do and be a little bit better than me. I was like, oh my God, making it come full circle with the conversation he had with his own dad. I was like, that's beautiful. And now it adds more context on why Ellie is so like gung-ho about having a kid, because it's almost like she wants to make up for like the whole Joel and her thing. And it's like, oh, I'm going to be a dad, because for her, in her mind, it's like, I had a great example. Like we didn't always get along both on our journey in the first season and the first game. But even where we were here, like our relationship was rocky for a bit. And she even said it to, Jesse, like, me and Joel will always be Joel, and Joel would be Joel, and I will be me, and we'll always be us, and nothing's going to change that. And now I think it adds more context of why she was so gung-ho about the parent thing, because now it's like, hey, like, it's almost like, once again, she's carrying on what Joel gave her in so many regards, and now it's almost like I get to pass that on to someone else. I mean, it's like the woman I am in love with, I get to have a family, and I'm going to try and do right because I had a great example by Joel, and I'm going to do him proud by being even better, And for Ellie, it's like, I don't know if I can ever forgive you. And you're like, fuck. I was like, is this the last thing they said? But then Ellie turned to him. She's like, but I'd like to try. You're just like, fuck, dude. It's just like, it's such a beautiful scene. Once again, I'm so curious how people who play the game feel about it. Like I said, this is at the end of the game. I think it's poignant to get it now because, like I said, during the game, like, I'm assuming these are all the flashbacks. Like I said, I knew about the museum one, but I'm assuming all these other flashbacks we get are, with the exception of the Eugene thing, because that's something specific to the show. So I'm sure some of those other flashbacks are a little different, but I'm sure, like, basically they're spread out throughout the game. Once again, it's a lost thing of some of the game is present day, some of it's flashbacks, in a lot more ways than one. But in the grand scheme of things, they kind of basically saved it all for one episode. So we might not get any Pedro as Joel next season at all, because all the flashbacks are potentially done, I think, with this episode. Who knows? I mean, it works in a duality way because you saved it all for this one episode, and people can, because I heard someone say, like, right, it's cool you can bring back Joel, but if you bring him back over and over again, they feel like it could take away from his depth. So if you save it all for one episode, but who knows? There might be like a situation where like Joel's ghost ends up talking to Ellie that, it's all like in her head type of thing. So he could always pop up one more time in that regard, but I think like all the flashbacks are done. I think they were all kind of composited for this episode and stuff. So that's my thinking. But once again, not knowing the story, I don't know. There could be more room for like at least one more small appearance from Joel, but not in the same capacity of this episode is what I'm saying. So, but I just thought that was beautiful, and like I said, I think it does a great job. Once again, people have their criticisms about some ways the show has been done. Once again, we're ignoring terrible people and like the way people like Bella Ramsey of it all. Luckily, they're off the internet. They're like, I'm not seeing any of that stuff, and I'm happier about it. I'm like, good, but people suck. So we're not talking about those people, just the general people who have criticisms. And those criticisms, I don't have those criticisms. They're just like, Bella's performance isn't really working for me. And I'm like, hey, that's okay. As long as you're not being a piece of shit about it, you could just be like, the performance and some of the story beats and some of the writing isn't working for me. But I think Bella's done a fantastic job. And my point is, I'm curious, like some of those criticisms, now with the context of this episode, does that make people feel better about some of the prior performance choices. I know like some of the tonality, especially of last episode, people felt like tonal whiplash in some regards of like the YA stuff versus like the really dark and serious stuff of it all. Was a conversation last episode. Once again, you're entitled to your criticisms. I don't think they're just because I don't have those criticisms doesn't invalidate. I want to make that perfectly clear. I'm not going to tell someone like you can't have criticisms that I believe are legitimate. There are people. Once again, we're not talking about the people who are just assholes just to be assholes. That the term chud. Like, we're not talking about the chud side of the internet. Just people who are like, this isn't working for me for whatever reason, writing, direction-wise, or performance-wise. That's perfectly okay. Once again, it works for me, but I know it's not working for everyone, and that's perfectly fine. That's just kind of what I want to kind of end this off on. And obviously, this end of this episode, very much like last episode, last season, I think it's interesting to end it the way they show her coming back in front of the theater. It's interesting in so many capacities because my understanding is even the little bit we got at the end of last episode with her bashing Nora's legs with the pipe, you never get you get the setup to that sequence, but like her actually doing it, you don't see it in the game, my understanding. And it's kind of like you get the aftermath of it, like her like being like, yeah, I did what I did to Nora. I think that's how it works. In fact, I think the Isaac situation apparently in the game works the same way. You don't see the torture scene, but you kind of see the aftermath and kind of hear about what he did. So the show kind of fleshed those out things to degrees and stuff like that. So I think that's interesting. But the other thing I was making a parallel to was because obviously the parallel to like Left Behind, the episode from last season, once again, the Riley episode. How does that episode end? It ends with her like finding stuff, taking care of Joel, and them being together. This episode, it's her walking alone to the theater after she kind of went full dark side Ellie last episode. And Nora's definitely dead. Well, maybe not, but I'd assume she is. And so it's like carrying the weight of what you did and knowing like the reasons behind it, but not caring because you've known what Joel did and you sat with it. And hell, she even lied to Gail being like, I have no idea what he was talking about, but she knew. But she didn't want to talk about that with anyone because for her, it's like, that's between me and Joel. And even Gail said it herself. The only person she was honest with was Joel. And now that he's gone, it's like she can't let anyone in on that. Like, that's going to be between me and Joel. And no matter, because even Dina said it herself, no matter what Joel did, at the end of the day, he didn't deserve what happened to him. Even if he hurt someone that was important to him, he didn't deserve that. So, but yeah, like I said, great episode. It's gonna be interesting to see where things end up next episode. Next episode is the season finale. Once again, I don't have the context of the story to know where we're going to end up. People from the beginning who know where how the story of the game have theorized. Like I said, I don't have the context, but I've heard people theorize about where this season could potentially end. So I'm really interested to see how it plays out, where we end up, and what it leads to and sets up for season 3. So. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.